Welcome to Mind Meets Body and Soul, a podcast that connects the dots between clinical mental health and spiritual holistic wellness. I'm Heather, a licensed clinical social worker and mental health guru.
And I'm Devon, a Reiki master, spiritual teacher, and lover of all things woo-woo. We're here to discuss various wellness topics, highlighting the connection between the mind, body, and soul.
We'll be offering nuggets of wisdom from each of our fields with the ultimate goal of bridging the gap between our two worlds. Whether you lean more into cognitive psychology
or flow with the woo-woo waters, we're here to help you prioritize yourself and unlock a fresh perspective to healing, growth, and expansion. We're so excited you're here. Let's jump in.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is episode 9 of Mind Meets Body and Soul. I'm so excited to be here. Devon, it's so good to see you. How are you doing?
Hi, it is good to see you too. This has officially been the longest that we've gone without seeing each other. So yeah. I'm doing well. I just got home from Italy a few days ago. So the jet lag has subsided a little bit, and here we are.
Oh my gosh, it's literally so good to see you. I feel like we said this in a previous episode, but this time was really the longest we've gone without seeing each other. So it's definitely really nice to have this space to reconnect with you.
It is, and it feels good to be recording this episode. Last week, we had our very first special guest on the podcast. It was so fun to have Alyssa in there. We hope you all enjoyed the conversation. There were so many important nuggets of wisdom that she offered. And so that brings us to episode 9.
Yeah. But before we jump into the episode, tell us about your trip. Tell us about Italy. How was it? Let us live vicariously through you.
Italy was so much fun. It was so filled with pizza, pasta, pastries, all my favorite things. I was in Italy for a week. I had a friend's wedding. So one of my best friends, childhood friends, she was getting married. And it was so special because my girlfriend group and everyone's significant others were all together in Italy for this trip. We all did our own separate travel, like prior to the wedding and after the wedding. But for the wedding weekend, all of us were together. And it was just such a surreal weekend to be with your best friends in a foreign country. And what I loved about the trip too was having the opportunity to put what we've been preaching into practice. I remember actually as I was leaving for the trip, you wished me a great time over text and you said something about being present or something that related to being present. And it's something that you and I have talked about that we're really intentionally putting into practice. And there was no better time to do it than on vacation in Italy with my best friends. We actually took turns throughout the weekend there, just stopping one another and being like, guys, we're in Italy together. Like there's 10 of us in my girlfriend group, like all 10 of us and significant others are here in Italy celebrating the marriage of one of our best friends. Like, how incredible is that? Bringing that mindfulness to the present moment. So I love opportunities like that to put what we preach into practice. And it was really, really great. So thank you for asking.
It was full of the 4 P's: pizza, pasta, pastries, and presents.
Ooh, I didn't add that 4th one in there. I love that addition. So cheesy. We love that though. Yes.
Also full of cheesiness, I'm hopeful.
Full of cheesiness. But yeah, it was full of the 4 P's. My heart, my stomach are very full. I'm happy to be back though and catching up on you. What have you been up to? I've been seeing some really fun developments, so please let us in.
Yeah, so recently I hired another therapist to join my team. So that's really exciting. Growing Mindset Therapy is growing. I celebrated, you came and helped me celebrate my 1-year anniversary as the in-house therapist for Little Words Project, which is just like beyond amazing to have this goal and this like thing that I wanted to come to fruition, and then be able to celebrate like a whole year of being in that space is just like, it's really cool. And I think you've actually really helped me take the time to celebrate it a little bit more, because I'm kind of just like, cool, yeah, like I'll host these events and I'll do these things and then like on to the next thing. So but big things, exciting things.
Exciting
It's
things.
good.
That's exactly why we are here in episode 9 today. So first and foremost, congratulations on expanding your team, on expanding your practice, hiring another therapist. It honestly is such an inspiration to see you running your own business and then expanding your team. I mean, your business is what, under 2 years old? 2 years old?
Yeah, 2 years this July. Yeah.
Under 2 years old, barely 2 years old, and you have now 3 other therapists under your practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Heather, that is incredible. I really want to take that moment to honor, to acknowledge, to celebrate that you started this business from ground zero, and now not even 2 years later, you have 3 therapists under your practice.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, Devon, and I'll say this now while we're recording, because it just feels like a good time. I'm tearing up and I'm getting emotional because this conversation that we're going to have today about like celebrating ourselves is something that I preach and I so firmly believe in. Here comes the emotion. But it's so hard for me to do for me. As you're talking, I'm hearing my Kathy, my like little anxiety or like my negative self voice discrediting what you're saying, and but this, or like, oh, but that, like, it's not that big of a deal. And I think that's sometimes why I get emotional when you guide me through a meditation or when we do Reiki together, because I don't often hold enough space for myself. I'm so used to, and I'll pat myself on the back a little, I'm so good at holding space for other people. But like when it comes to holding space for myself, I'm like all the way at the bottom of the list, like all the way on the back burner. So it kind of reminds me of the conversation we had a couple episodes back where it was hard for you and it brought some things up for you. Like stuff is coming up for me. So if I'm quiet or if I'm less engaged this episode, it's only because I'm bringing forward my like real, true self, I'm taking off my therapy hat a little bit in this episode, and we'll see what comes of it.
And thank you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for allowing yourself to have a vulnerable moment. And I know that exactly what you shared is what so many of us experience. I know I personally experience it too. So I'm really excited to dive into this episode, perfectly timed. And as it always goes, I just came from a session with a client where this exact topic was brought up. So let's dive in, celebrating you, the expansion of your business, and the piece that connects us both, the Little Words Project, which is how we first connected in the first place, now celebrating your 1-year anniversary. It has been a very eventful month for you, but one that I'm so happy that we get to celebrate together and that I get to honor you and celebrate you for. So we last saw each other in person about 2 weeks ago, I think it was. We had this workshop, round 2, at the Little Words Project headquarters. It was exactly 6 months to the day of our first workshop at Little Words Project, which is so synchronistic. Totally unplanned. And the fact that I was there to do it in honor, to facilitate it in honor of you, was so great. And it was such a great time. So again, congratulations, Heather, on 1 year at Little Words Project. It is a huge accomplishment. And the fact that you are reaching so many people, impacting so many people through the work that you do and simply showing up and who you are is huge. So cue the waterworks again if you would like.
Thank you. I stuffed them down a little bit. Thanks.
And coming to this episode today, we really aim to discuss why acknowledgement and celebration is such an important part, and actually probably like a core desire of ours as human beings, how we practice acknowledgement and celebration in our personal lives, and then how we suggest or recommend that our clients, that you, our audience, practices it as well in your day to day. So, Heather, since you mentioned that you are somebody who preaches it, who, coaches your clients through the practice of acknowledging and celebrating themselves, why don't you kick it off for us? What is the importance of it in your mind?
I mean, I think it's essential. It's so important. If we don't, one, touch back down to earth, get out of this autopilot state, like that's one piece of it, right? Like being present, which we've talked about over and over again. But then the other piece is acknowledging like all of the things that we're doing and all of the effort that we're putting in. We have to reward ourselves, and we have to acknowledge like the small victories, the successes that we're having. There's this quote I remember like thinking in college, like something about like the rear view mirror, like don't look behind you, just like keep looking forward because that's what matters. And like I actually strongly disagree with that. I think we have to look behind us and see like how far we've come. Because if I'm trying to climb this mountain ahead of me and all I'm doing is looking ahead, it can feel really daunting. It can feel really tiring, exhausting. So looking behind us gives us the opportunity to say like, wow, look how far I've come, and look at all that I've accomplished thus far, because it is pretty incredible. And it is really important for us to hold space for the good stuff, for the things that make us smile, because otherwise, like, what the heck are we doing here other than just like living these lives plainly? Like it's kind of boring if we're not.
It is. And I fully agree with you. It's so unfulfilling to constantly be looking forward, to constantly be chasing what's ahead, and to never take that moment. I mean, we're never going to feel fully satisfied unless we take that moment to pause, as you always say, to take a moment to check back and be like, wow, I have traveled, I have evolved, I have healed, I have gotten so far. And it's in that moment that you allow yourself to acknowledge and celebrate yourself, that you find true gratification.
Yeah, there's I don't know what movie it is, but there's a movie where Owen Wilson is like taking mental pictures, and he like blinks a lot of times, and he'll go like taking mental pictures of like the moments that he's in. And I think we do have to do that, not only from like the presence lens, but so that we can look back and be like, oh, that was cool. Like almost having this scrapbook in our brain that we think fondly of these things that happened, and that we, one layer, we pay attention to it. If we're not paying attention to it, then we won't remember it, right? So the presence piece is big here. But then like also being like, that was so cool. Like I was present and there in that moment, and it was awesome. And I'm going to celebrate it. And it's going to make me smile. It doesn't have to be this monumental thing that you've done.
Yeah.
But even celebrating the fact that you were present in a moment, I think is worthwhile, because otherwise, like you said, unfulfilling is like the perfect way to put it. Otherwise, we're just so unsatisfied. Things are just so like meh.
Yeah. And I loved the question you posed. Like, what is the point of life if we don't take those moments to celebrate ourselves? If we're constantly just climbing the mountain, to what? Are we getting anywhere? Like, is there actually a top of the mountain ever if we're not taking those moments to look back and celebrate?
So then for you, Devon, how do you teach this, practice this, preach this?
So I come at this from the lens of like more of my spiritual energy healing teachings, and I relate it a lot to our inner child. So I know that the inner child will be a topic of conversation for a later episode, but just touching on it briefly, within each and every one of us is a child version of us, right? Like a younger version of us. And I say that acknowledgement and celebration is likely a core desire or core need that we as humans have, because when you think about when we are children, when we're younger, we are constantly looking for that external support, that validation, that celebration from our caretakers or our adult role models or even our peers, right? Like we have those people in our lives who celebrate us every step of the way. Like, wow, you took your first step. You said your first word. You made a really cool finger painting. Especially in the earlier years, we have those people that are constantly celebrating us. And we know how good it feels. Like we know how validating it feels to be celebrated. And then somewhere along the line, and I mentioned this with my client today, somewhere along the line, and it's likely when this element of comparison comes in, or we start receiving grades, we start receiving criticism on the things that we're doing, we kind of lose the ability to be celebrated and acknowledged for the little things. And we only allow ourselves to be, and sometimes not even, but to be acknowledged and celebrated for the big things, like graduating from college, like getting engaged, getting married, having a kid. And so all of the little things, the daily moments that we can be celebrating and acknowledging, they just get thrown to the wayside or totally ignored.
I think that this validation piece is a really big part of this conversation, because I'm also having a lot of conversations with clients about their need for external validation. And to me, actually, like the external validation, it doesn't really scratch the itch. It's kind of like this band-aid, or this way we think we're going to feel better. We're like, oh, let me go to my partner, or oh, let me go to my friend and get this validation. And it like might lift us up for a moment, but then it goes away and we almost feel even more empty or even less fulfilled when we're getting it externally. And we really do have to work so hard to validate ourselves and be able to even just like hold space for ourselves. So even if we're not jumping right into like celebrating and throwing ourselves a party, I think it even starts by validating our own feelings and like honoring our experiences. Like we kind of gaslight ourselves a little bit sometimes. So like even before, like a prerequisite for celebrating yourself is acknowledging that inner child, is validating your emotional experiences, is like holding space for yourself.
I love that little extra component that you put in, because I think that validation piece is so huge. And you're right, that acknowledgement, that validation, and that celebration, they all go hand in hand. And they are good. It is, I think it's helpful to see them as like stepping stones of first acknowledging, bringing that awareness, that presence that we keep speaking about, and then that validation, and that leading to celebration. So thank you for offering that really important piece. And how does that look like then in your personal life? Like I know that you mentioned that it's more difficult for you at times to take that moment to honor, celebrate yourself, and of course much less to receive that from others. But in those moments that you do catch yourself allowing yourself to celebrate yourself, what does that look like for you?
I think for me, I'm in the prerequisite phase. Like I haven't yet finished the course in holding space for and validating myself and my experiences. I think I've come a long way in owning my own business. I've grown a lot in the last almost 2 years in being able to say, like, yeah, like this is hard. Like it's kind of crazy that I started a business from nothing to a full-time job. And now I have other people that are relying on me. And now I have a podcast. And like all of these things have come from that. So it's almost for me personally, just acknowledging on a factual basis that like Fact. I started a business from nothing. Yes. Can I believe that? Like, that's just like, I can't really argue with that, right? It's a fact. I have a full caseload. I don't know the exact number of how many people I see, but like I'm full all week long. Like I actually am like maxed out, can't take anybody else on. Fact, right? So for me, it's like I start with like, is this true? Yes or no? And I can't discredit myself if it's a fact. So I start holding space for myself by acknowledging the data. I think that's an easier thing for my emotional brain. That's a harder thing for my emotional brain to fight against. So that's where I'm starting. I'm getting to a place where there are moments where I'm like, this is pretty cool. Like, it's cool to get in my car and plug my phone in, and my CarPlay comes up and I see our little podcast there. And I'm like, that's cool. Like, that's fun. So I do have these moments of like, wow, that is awesome. This is cool. But I don't know that I'm like full on celebrating myself 100%. It's just starting with like holding space for like what is real and what is true.
I think it's very natural not to be in this place of like celebrating yourself all the time. I think so many of us are there. And one thing that you mentioned about yourself too, which I think so many of our listeners will resonate with, and why I love our dynamic, is because you do tend to lean towards that more like data, facts, logical side, where it's like, yeah, I need to see the hard, cold facts to then make that emotional connection. That's a great suggestion of like, if you're that kind of person, if you resonate with what Heather said, then lay out the facts. I'm doing X, Y, Z. I did this. I have this, and it helps then when you can look at like a list of all the amazing things that you have going on. It may help you make that emotional connection. So awesome suggestion there. Thank you, Heather.
I actually have a list in my phone. I used to have like a bucket list in my phone of things I wanted to do. And then I remember, I don't know what it was. I did like something cool happened to me. And I was like, let me also add a list in here of like cool things I've done. So the list is literally like cool shit I've done. And there's like, this podcast is on there. Like, and I sometimes forget to update it, but I think it's important that like sometimes I can look at that and almost ground myself and like, okay, like not everything is awful, not everything is going to shit. Like there's been cool things and good moments too. Like that's my rear view mirror.
Yeah, I love that. Notes, great suggestion. Writing it down is the best way. But I'm with you there. Sometimes I don't always like remember to update that list. Thank you for the reminder to continue coming back to that note there.
So Devon, then what does this look like in your personal life?
I'm with you there. I am in a process of like training myself to take time to acknowledge and celebrate, and furthermore, to receive that acknowledgement and celebration from others. So I think it's very common for us as coaches, healers, therapists, and just in general to society to be able to dish it out or serve it better than we can receive it or take it in. One thing that really helped me, especially throughout this trip in Italy, was that we spend weeks, months, maybe even years or a year planning out a trip, an event, like a trip to Italy, right? Like we get all of the itinerary together with the hotel, with the flights, with the activities and events. And then the event comes, the week comes, and then you're so just like wrapped up in the presence of it or in the present moment of it that sometimes you forget to take a moment and be like, wow, I created this. I did this. I am here right now because I planned this out. I called the restaurants. I made the reservations. I looked up the travel times. So, this practice of acknowledgement and celebration is one that I am still working on too, being really intentional and conscious with. But I can proudly say that during my time in Italy, I would pause wherever I was and I would be like, wow, I created this. This boat that I'm on right now, I did this. This dinner that I'm having right now, I did this. Like, just, it's that same like inner child desire to feel like something that you did or something that you created was really cool, whether it's creating a Lego tower or being on a boat in Italy. There's no difference just because we are older, the emotional needs that we have. So that is very huge for me, like being able to take that time. And I think it brings the power back to us of being like, wow, I created this. I did this, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. It teleported me back to a memory when I graduated from grad school. I booked myself a trip. It was kind of a solo trip, kind of a group trip, in that like I went by myself and like met up with a group of strangers in Thailand for like this group trip. And I remember vividly sitting on the flight. I finally I booked all the things. I was planning to get myself there. And I remember sitting on the flight and I looked out the window and I was like, I did this. Exactly what you said. Like, this is so cool. And I remember like I got the chills and I was like, this is such an exciting thing that I'm doing. I have no idea how it's going to go or how it's going to happen, but like I got myself here. And that in and of itself is really cool.
Hell yeah. Celebrating that past version of yourself who was a badass then and is a badass now. My question for you is, why do you think it's so difficult for us to take those moments to celebrate and acknowledge and honor ourselves?
I don't know if this is true, but my like initial thought when you were asking me that is it's selfish. Like, and not that it is, but maybe that's how we were taught or raised. Or I think as a woman growing up in the family that I grew up in and in this society, we're supposed to nurture and care for others and show up for others. And I think maybe it feels icky and self-centered and cocky to be like, yeah, go me. Like, that's awesome. That's cool. Like, I think there's a fine line that people have created a fine line for being able to like celebrate yourself without crossing into this like overly cocky, overly confident world. And for me, I'm like, if there's a line, I'm not going to even get near it because I
Yep.
don't want to risk crossing it. So I don't know if that's real, but that's just like the initial reaction that I'm having.
No, that's great. I think that's very valid too. I think coming at it from an energetic standpoint too, where you have masculine energy and you have feminine energy. I don't mean man versus women. I mean the energies that exist, within each one of us. We are in a very masculine dominated society. And by masculine, again, don't mean man, don't mean feminine woman. And by masculine energy, I mean that the masculine essence is very giving, it's very doing, it's very action oriented. And so the feminine energy of receiving has kind of been put to the wayside. So when you brought in your truth earlier of like, it's easier for you to give out the compliments, right? Or to celebrate and honor others, that's what comes naturally to us because energetically, we are in this place of giving as opposed to being in a place, a more feminine essence of allowing ourselves to receive. It doesn't come naturally to us as individuals because it's not natural right now in society.
I'm also thinking too, like you touched on earlier, the importance, and again, we'll get to the inner child stuff more deeply in a future conversation, but it does feel a little bit more accessible for me to be proud of little Heather than it does for me to be proud of 31-year-old Heather. So maybe that's again a societal thing. Like, I don't know where that comes from. That might just like totally be Heather only, like a me personal thing. But I think a good place for myself and some of our listeners who might resonate with the things I'm saying, a good place for us to start might be like picturing that inner child or thinking of her or having a picture of her and being like, yeah, that's cool. Like, I remember seeing a TikTok that was going viral a couple months ago about people having pictures of themselves as a child, and it was like what I do for work is I'm a therapist, and like I just keep going and I help other people and I do all the things. And then it was like the picture of little Heather, she would be saying like, wait, we do that? Like, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And it's fun to think about, or it's easier for me to think like, what would little Heather say? And she'd be proud and she'd be excited. So if I can do that work and connecting more with her, that might allow me to celebrate myself more authentically. Does that make any sense at all?
100%. It's a great suggestion. And I think if we find ourselves having that difficulty of celebrating our adult selves, looking to our childlike selves is a sure way to celebrate, because the way that we act, the way that we speak to, the way that we behave around children and the things that they're doing is so much softer. It's so much more celebratory than the way that we think about, feel about, act towards adults. So, very valid. So, I know that you just offered a really valuable tool there. Is there something else that you also offer to your clients in terms of taking that time to acknowledge, to validate, to celebrate themselves?
It all depends on where they are in this process. But one of my big like therapy isms is pay attention on purpose. So they will leave the session and I will say for homework, go out and pay attention on purpose. And I never really thought of myself as a data person, but I guess I am learning that about myself in this conversation too. I'll say, go out, pay attention on purpose, get some data about what that brings up for you, what you notice, and then come back to me with that and we'll process through it. We'll unpack it, because not to really drive home this presence point, but you're not going to be able to celebrate the things if you don't have them stored away in your memories, if you're not even noticing them. So for me, it's starting with like paying attention and intentionally, purposefully paying attention to all of those things. Even if you just smile in a moment, like I think there's something there to be said. Our smiles are contagious, not only to other people, but I think to ourselves. So pay attention on purpose and smile
I
would
love
be the
that.
things that I would suggest.
Yeah, get those notes out on your phone and just start tracking it all down. Cool things, great
Yeah.
things, little things, big things that you are doing. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all the things. What's that Blink 182 song? All the Small Things. Is that a song? Is that a lyric or
Yeah,
something?
yeah, all the small things. I can't remember what the song is about, though, if that applies, but we'll run
I
with it.
don't know either, but that's what's in my head right now.
Perfect.
So, what about you, Devon? What would your tip or what would you suggest if you were working with a client on this?
So, the inner child thing is huge. How we speak to ourselves, how we celebrate ourselves. Another component to this, too, is the way that we accept acknowledgement and celebration from others, or compliments even from others, right? Like, it's not natural for us to accept a compliment. Oftentimes, especially I know as women, somebody will be like, Heather, I love your hair today. And then your immediate response is like, I love your shirt, right? Like, you divert the compliment or the attention from yourself to somebody else. Again, because it's easier to give being in that more masculine energy than it is to receive. So, my number one suggestion for this episode is to just be mindful of when you are receiving that acknowledgement, that celebration, take that time to just say thank you, to allow yourself to receive it in that moment, as opposed to diverting the attention away from you onto another person. That's a really difficult thing for us to do. But if we can just bring awareness and start practicing that, like taking a compliment, accepting the acknowledgement and the celebration from others, I think that'll be really helpful too, and just as valuable as us being able to acknowledge and celebrate ourselves.
Yeah. Just like we have to work on like our window of tolerance for things that make us anxious or things that make us uncomfortable. I mean, I think the compliments and the celebrations also are making us uncomfortable. And I think we have to work on like sitting in that moment. I always say like being uncomfortable isn't bad. It's just foreign and unfamiliar. So we have to learn that like, okay, someone complimenting me is far from a bad thing, but it doesn't feel natural, or it doesn't feel the most familiar. It doesn't feel the most safe, I think sometimes. So we have to work on like reframing that. And in order to reframe that, we have to start building up our ability to tolerate those moments and just say thank you. Like someone compliments me on my shirt and I'm like, thanks, it's from here, or I bought it here, or I got it on sale. Like I divert. I'm like, ooh, no, like,
Yep.
don't compliment me, or your hair looks nice. I'm like, thanks, I washed it. Like,
Yep. Or it's like, really? I haven't
you.
done anything to it. Yeah.
Right. So
We
it's
question.
just learning to say thank you. Mm-hmm.
Just learning to say thank you 100%. And I've loved having this conversation. I mean, what you said was like, a practice like this does kind of throw you out of your comfort zone. And something that we are doing time and again in each episode of this podcast is offering tips, suggestions, and reasons why it's a beautiful thing for us to be outside of our comfort zone and how to make the discomfort more comfortable for ourselves. So, just patting ourselves on the back, both of us, acknowledging, celebrating us both for what we are doing, what we are showcasing episode after episode here.
Yeah. I just keep thinking about little Heather, and she's like so cute, and she like deserves better and more. And I owe it to her to give her that.
Oh, beautiful. Little Heather and little Devon.
Had to come back out.
And all the little younger cute versions of all of our audience just joining us in here too. So let that be a beautiful invitation to acknowledge, to validate, to celebrate those younger little versions of ourselves. And thank you, Heather, for allowing yourself to be vulnerable in this moment.
Thanks for holding space for me, Devon.
Always. So with that, I think it's your turn to look up at your vision board, if you will, and let us know what is calling out to you today. What can we leave our audience with?
I have this note. It's not on my vision board directly, but I have like little notes around it, and it's from my godson when he was little. And it says, "Dear Heather, I heart you. I'm proud of you," from Brian in his like little kid handwriting. So I don't know what to make of that, but that's the thing that like I first saw. And I don't think I've looked at that little note from him in a long time, but that's what I'm seeing.
That's so special. I love that you allowed yourself to feel the sentiment and to receive that. So beautiful, beautiful. Wow. Who would have thunk, although I'm not surprised at all, that these episodes would bring us to tears. But we welcome them all.
These were the first tears, I think, actually.
Right? I think they are. Although I may have like almost started crying in that one episode where I was just like so scatterbrained and uncomfortable, but I held it together. But yeah, this was a really sentimental episode, and I'm just really grateful, as always, to be doing this with you.
Me too. I feel that.
I think that wraps up episode number 9. We'll leave you off on that note. Yeah. And we look forward to seeing you all again next week.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for listening and bearing with us. We hope you take something from this. I know I'm going to go think about it marinate on it a little bit. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye. We are so glad that you took the time to share this space with us. We'll be releasing new episodes of Mind Meets Body and Soul every Tuesday, so be sure to give us a follow and share this podcast with those you love.
To connect with us and join our communities, head to the show notes where you'll find our contact information and individual websites. Until next week, stay grounded, keep growing, and trust that everything you seek is unfolding for you.